Today's story is about one such choice. It begins in a quiet town with a girl, a contract, and a love she never expected to find. Late autumn in the quiet valley town of Silver Glen, just outside Napa, moved slowly, like the quiet breath of an old soul asleep. The creek ran still, reflecting the soft gray sky and the golden oak leaves fluttering in the wind. A soft breeze wandered through worn rooftops, carrying the scent of toasted bread from stone ovens and the distant chime of a bicycle bell echoing down a gentle hill. In a wooden house at the end of a quiet street, Lina Morales stood by the window, watching the fading light paint soft strokes across the wall. She was 19, with eyes that knew how to dream and a heart already familiar with folding those dreams away. She once wanted to become a photographer, but life, as always, had other plans. When her grandmother, the last of her family, began coughing harder, unable to stand on her own, Lina understood. Dreamy eyes had to meet harsh reality. A marriage contract was laid on the table, and from that moment on, her life turned down a path where love had no place, only sacrifice. And in the chill of early autumn, Lina signed a marriage contract with a man she had never met. Not out of love, but out of hope to hold on to someone she couldn't afford to lose. The contract was delivered by hand, tucked inside a thick ivory envelope with no return address. But Lina knew. The woman who brought it, Emilia Duarte, was the private attorney of Sebastian Rivas. Sebastian was a famous name, though few truly knew him. An award-winning architect, once hailed as a visionary, he had withdrawn from public life years ago. He lived alone in a stone manor tucked between the vineyards of Napa Valley, far from city lights, far from the noise. After the sudden death of his wife in a snowstorm accident, Sebastian disappeared from the social map. The press once called him the Phantom of Brilliance, a man unseen but endlessly speculated about. The contract was clear: legal marriage for 1 year, no intimacy required, no asset sharing. Lina would receive a monthly stipend, access to a private room, and most importantly, a full medical treatment plan for her grandmother at a private clinic in San Francisco. Only one condition: appear with Sebastian at selected public events, maintain confidentiality, and do not terminate the agreement early. Emilia didn't speak much, but when Lina asked why her, someone he'd never met, the lawyer simply replied, "Because Sebastian doesn't want someone with expectations. He chooses someone with blank spaces, someone who hasn't been seen yet." That night, Lina sat beside her grandmother's bed, listening to her shallow breaths. In the dark, she reopened the envelope, reread every line, and when the mist settled on the rooftops, she signed. Not for the money, but because she was terrified of waking up one day with no one left to call her granddaughter. The wedding took place on a cloudy Friday morning. No dress, no flowers, no music, just a wooden table in the villa's drawing room, 3 witnesses, and a legal official. Lena wore a white blouse, soft trousers, and her grandmother's silver necklace. Sebastian didn't wear a ring, neither did she. "This isn't a ceremony," he said quietly before signing. "Just procedure." She nodded. It all happened so fast, she barely had time to feel anything. The Rivas estate was a Tuscan stale stone house nestled among the sun-washed vineyards of Napa Valley. Thick walls, endless hallways, towering glass windows, and staircases that curved toward places no one ever seemed to reach. It was breathtaking, but cold. After the signing, Lina was shown to her private room on the 3rd floor. White curtains moved gently in the breeze. The bed was made with cream-colored linens, the wooden floor polished to a soft shine. A single armchair by the window, and on the desk, a cup of tea, still warm. No one pressed her to speak. No one asked more. Sebastian gave a slight nod, then walked away, as if he, too, wasn't sure what role he was playing in this story. Lina stood still for a long moment. Her fingers gripped the teardrop-shaped pendant tightly. Her grandmother once told her, every woman needs something to remind her she's still herself, even when everything around says otherwise. She didn't know how she'd sleep in this unfamiliar room, but she knew one thing: she had chosen this. And now she would learn how to stay. Their first breakfast together passed in silence. On the table, rye bread, boiled eggs, coffee, and orange juice, carefully arranged, as if someone hoped that order might substitute for warmth. Lena sat across from Sebastian. They ate slowly, without glancing up. Only the soft clink of cutlery and the ticking of the old wall clock filled the space. Until he asked, unexpectedly, "Did you know lavender smells different in the morning than it does in the evening?" She looked up, slightly confused. He nodded toward the garden, where a pale lavender bush swayed in the wind. "In the morning, it's fresh, but by dusk it turns sharp, like memories that have been left out in the sun," he said quietly. She nodded, offering a small smile. It was the first time she saw him not cold, but remembering someone. That afternoon, Lena wandered through the villa and found a small room at the end of the first-floor hallway. The door was ajar. Inside were covered easels, an old wooden table with brushes, paints, and sketch paper. Everything dusty, but not abandoned. On the walls hung unfinished canvases, a woman's hand, eyes cast downward, a cascade of loose hair. As Lena stood quietly observing, Sebastian appeared behind her. No scolding, just a long breath. "My mother's," he said. "She was a painter. I haven't touched any of it since she died." She turned gently and replied, "They look like they're still waiting for someone to finish them." He didn't respond, but that day, for the first time, he didn't leave the room before she did. On a cloudy morning, while searching for a quiet corner to write in her journal, Lena stepped into a small room beneath the staircase, once used for storage. In the back of an old cabinet, tucked between rusted tin boxes and hardcover books, she found a vintage analog camera. Brown leather body, glass lens still gleaming. She brought it upstairs, gently wiped off the dust, and when she looked through the viewfinder, it was as if she'd been handed someone else's eyes, yet saw something entirely her own. From that day, Lena began to photograph. The seemingly still moments, sunlight filtering into the hallway, a chair casting a long shadow in the afternoon, the housekeeper's hands rinsing vegetables. Each frame captured something unnoticed, until her lens gave it life. Sebastian never commented, but he often appeared near wherever she was, silent, watching. One afternoon, Lena left a craft envelope on his desk, nothing on it but an initial, S. Inside were 3 handcrafted prints on textured paper, one of the garden after rain, one of the hallway sliced by curtain-filtered light, and one of Sebastian himself in profile reading in the library. He studied each image for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "You see what others ignore." She said nothing, but after that day, whenever she picked up the camera, his eyes no longer turned away. And for the first time, the house felt like it was beginning to answer to its own name. It all started with a photograph. At a small gallery in downtown Napa for emerging artists, one black and white portrait was framed at the center of the gallery. Sebastian, in profile near a window, soft light brushing across his thoughtful face, a faint crease between his brows. The photo was credited to El Morales. The art world took notice. A cultural magazine praised it as a rare, empathetic gaze from a young observer. But days later, a gossip website published a leaked document, the marriage contract between Sebastian Rivas and Lena Morales. Everything unraveled like wildfire in dry wind. A marriage signed like a business deal? Architectural genius uses young wife to rehab his image? They called her a climber, called him a desperate recluse. Sebastian was furious. He wanted to sue. But Lena, after a long silent night, simply said, "If the truth has already been torn open, let's show them all of it, not just the part they want to twist." They agreed to hold a press conference. No defense, no PR team, just Sebastian standing alone under the lights, and Lena in the front row, unflinching. "Yes," he began, "we signed a contract, but no line in it mentioned the light she would bring into this house." He paused, his voice lower. "No line in that contract said she'd make me look back at myself the way she did." Lena said nothing. But when they walked out of that room crowded with flashing cameras, she reached for his hand. And for the first time, Sebastian didn't pull away. Lena's grandmother passed away on an early spring morning before the sun had warmed the glass panes. She lost the last person who called her by a tender name, the one who placed her first camera in her hands. The call came quietly. Lena didn't cry right away. She simply clutched her silver necklace, as if afraid the last thread of memory might slip away too. Sebastian said nothing. He just came and held her, for a long time. In that embrace there were no promises, no comfort, just presence. 3 hours later, they were on the road. He drove through the night. Lena didn't speak, just leaned her head against the window, clutching her grandmother's old wool scarf. The funeral was held in the wooden house where Lena had grown up. A few relatives, quiet neighbors. Sebastian never left her side. When she stood to speak and her voice caught, he placed a hand gently on her back, not to hold her up, but so she'd know she wasn't alone. The old wooden house after the funeral felt drained of sound. No more condolences. No more whispered prayers on the porch. Lena sat curled up on her grandmother's old rocking chair, her eyes red, but the tears had stopped. Sebastian sat across from her, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. "She used to sit here every morning," Lena whispered, reading the paper with her old glasses. Always said, "Just reading to remember how to see the world." Sebastian stayed silent for a long time. Then he spoke, softly, like he was confessing to himself. "I never told anyone. My wife died in a mountain accident. We argued the day before. She went alone and never came back." Lena looked up. Their eyes met. After that, he continued, "I thought I couldn't love again. I built walls, created distance, made a contract with a stranger because it felt safer." A pause. Then he added, even quieter, "But then you came, and little by little, I realized, I don't want you to leave." She didn't speak. She crossed the quiet room like someone stepping into memory, not certainty. And when she sat beside him, her hand found his, not to hold, but to stay. And in that silent, hollow house, for the first time, two broken souls knew they were no longer alone. Weeks later, back at the villa, they cleaned out his mother's old studio, the room Lena had once quietly wandered into. They dusted the shelves, opened the curtains, rehung the unfinished canvases, and placed a small wooden chair by the window. Lena added a framed photo of her grandmother, young, hair in a bun, soft smile in her eyes, onto the bookshelf. On the door, they hung a hand-carved wooden sign, Casa Clarita, Clarita's house. No one said it out loud, but they both understood. From that moment on, they were living together, not because of any clause, but because they had chosen to stay when no one asked them to. Lena received the email one late afternoon, sunlight slanting through the library windows. The Visual Arts Center in Paris, the one she had applied to on a whim, had accepted her. 3 months in France with a private studio and full fellowship support. She stared at the screen, not in hesitation, but in awe. It had once been her dream, before everything else began. That night, over a quiet dinner with Sebastian, she said, "I got invited to Paris, 3 months. He set down his spoon. "Not surprised. And do you want to go?" "I do, but I'm afraid of leaving you behind." He looked up, his eyes not sad, just steady. "Go. Don't stay because of me. I don't need you here to feel loved. I just need to know you're living what's true for you." She bit her lip, nearly cried, but instead of tears came a trembling, grateful smile. "I'll come back." He nodded and gently said, "I'm not going anywhere, just waiting for your light to return." The airport was wrapped in early morning mist, as if Paris hadn't called loudly enough, and Napa wasn't quite ready to let go. Sebastian walked beside Lena, quiet but slow, like he wanted to stretch every second. At the security gate, he handed her a small box wrapped in soft gray linen. She opened it, a compact travel camera, light enough to carry anywhere. On its body, engraved, "So you'll never forget how you see the world. Or how I see you." Lena clutched the camera, looked up. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. "I'll photograph everything, send them to you every week." He nodded, smiled gently. "No filters. I want to see the world through your eyes, exactly as you see it." In the weeks that followed, they lived in 2 cities, 2 time zones, 2 rhythms. But not a day passed without a message. Texts at dawn, video calls in the quiet of night, photos from cafe corners, from rooftops in Paris dusted with sun. Their love, unforced, unpossessive, grew in that silence. And in every frame Lena sent, there was always a kind of softness, like the way he looked at her the first time, from the doorway of the old house. 3 months later, Lena stepped off the plane at San Francisco International Airport, her camera slung over one shoulder, and a smile soft as autumn light. She had changed, not older, but clearer. Her eyes still shone, but it was a light that had passed through mist. Sebastian stood at the arrival's gate. No flowers, no signs, just hands in pockets and eyes he couldn't hide. When she reached him, they said nothing, just an embrace. Long, quiet, complete. "I'm home," she whispered into his neck. "I know," he replied, his voice caught. And for the first time in a long while, they both knew they weren't just in love. They had finally found their way home. Time passed, quietly but steadily. Seasons slipped by, one bloom after another, until 5 years had folded themselves between that quiet airport reunion and the life they now shared. The Rivas estate had changed. It was no longer just a place to live, it was a place to belong. There were tiny footsteps on the stone patio, the scent of cookies from the warm kitchen, and the laughter of children echoing through pale lavender rows. Late afternoon in Napa felt like a lullaby. Golden light slipped through the trees, settling softly on the pale lavender field along the hillside. The scent of the blooms mixed with breeze and the faint laughter of children echoed across the stone porch. A boy around 4 held the hand of a smaller girl, perhaps 2, walking slowly between the flower rows. He whispered something to her. She giggled, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. On the steps, Sebastian and Lena sat close, each with a warm cup of tea. His hair had silvered further, her eyes had grown quieter, but deeper, brighter, as if every past sorrow had only laid the canvas for this love to be painted more boldly. "I used to be afraid I wouldn't belong anywhere," Lena murmured, eyes on the children. "Now you have an entire world," Sebastian replied, gently tightening his grip on her hand. They didn't need to say more, because what unfolded before them, 2 little souls hand in hand among the lavender rows behind the old vineyard, now grown wild and gentle, was the fullest proof of every choice they had made. And really, what love is more complete than watching it walk, laugh, and call you mom and dad? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet, unexpected love. And hey, drop a comment below. Have you ever found love in the most unlikely place? We'd love to hear your story.